Dear friends, continuing our discussion about dependent origination, I'd like to see if we can speak tonight about identification. If we could take the idea that every single thing that we experience in our world is not only experienced as an object, but also experienced as an aspect of ourself. So we may experience things as being good for me or bad for me, or like me in some way, similar to me in some way, or different than me in some way. In that way, all of the things that we experience are contributing towards building up and reifying this idea of the self. The metaphor or the example that came to mind as I was reflecting about this was an experience I had right after graduating college. I visited Ireland. While I was there, I realized at some point that if I didn't speak, or they couldn't hear my American accent, I could be mistaken for an Irish person. And so it was this sense of like this discovery, oh, there's one place in the world where I fit in. I am a member of the Irish people. And that was equally as memorable as all of the other memorable and interesting things that I experienced on that trip. So there's an article that I was looking at today, which had a little bit of a different way of looking at dependent arising by comparing it with the rituals of Brahmanism. The author's idea is that the parallels between the Brahmanical rituals and the format of the 12 steps of dependent arising is so obvious that everybody would have realized that this was an extended metaphor for something else. It would be like as if I was trying to explain some idea to you and I explained it in terms of the offertory and the Eucharist and the homily and different parts of a Catholic Mass. Anybody who was familiar with that would draw the analogy. I'm going to show you the article. Those who want to look it up and read it can do so, but you don't have to. Burning yourself, Paticca as a description of the arising of a false sense of self modeled on Vedic rituals by Linda Blanchard in the Journal of the Oxford Center for Buddhist Studies. Okay. So there's this creation mythology where the avidya, the ignorance or the unknowing, is compared to some kind of a primordial chaos, a dark state in which the universal was just a swirling, undifferentiated something that doesn't have any self or any other, and there's nothing to see, there's no sense faculties, there's no individual because it's all just one. So it's this chaotic state. And then what's emerging from this chaotic state, okay, independent origination, the thing that emerges is called sankhara, which is sometimes translated as mental formations or volitional formations. But in terms of the mythology, we can think of it as being the creative force, that which is arising out of this darkness that has the desire to create, Kara means create. San means together. And so Sankara has the desire to create. In terms of human life, you could associate Sankara with that aspect of lust which desires to make a baby. So the males and females would get together and create children. Then emerging out of this Sankara is this vijnana. The characteristic of vijnana or consciousness, we think of that as being like the knowing faculty. Or we associate it with when an individual is conscious as opposed to being unconscious. But this author, in terms of the mythology associated with the vijnana, has the desire to know. Deep primordial impulses in the universe that are causing this universe to be created. So there's the gods of creation and the gods of knowing, representing these strong forces, having the desire to know, the desire to create. And from these two comes to be the fourth factor, independent arising, which is called this nama rupa, name and form. And that is symbolizing this primordial division of the world into self and other. Sankara, in order to create something, it has to create another person besides itself. Vijnana, in order to know something, there has to be some object besides itself. And then in this nama rupa, it could be compared to, in the human life, after the baby's born, right, they will have a naming ceremony where the father takes the child and gives the name to the child. And in doing that naming ceremony, it's creating the child as an individual, but it's also creating the father as an individual father. So in this way, we see that this it's kind of like a second birth, and it's creating the existence of oneself being the subject of all of our actions, and all of our actions are done to the objects of our actions. So the other one is the object, and we ourselves are experienced as the subject. And we have, by having this encounter, this differentiation between the internal and the external, the self and the other, is also seems to be creating this self. The next step on the dependent origination is called salayatana. That's the 6 sense bases. What it says is that in the creation mythology of Brahmanism, there's this moment where the diversity of the world is created, which has all different kinds of, snakes and monkeys and lions and trees and mountains and water and rivers and oceans, and all of this diversity, this multiplicity of all of the many different objects in the world. In the mythology, the Atman, or the self, is shattered into a multiplicity. And all of these diverse objects are all self, except that they have kind of because they're broken, they lose connection with their true selfhood. And then the rest of the story is sort of involved with these beings who are these little fragments of the primordial great Atman of Brahma, trying to find their way home, trying to rediscover their true self. The middle part of Dependent origination is something that's very much developed in the West in terms of psychology and how suffering comes to be, in terms of contact giving rise to feeling, giving rise to craving, giving rise to clinging, giving rise to becoming. And this author is comparing it to the ritual, the Vedic fire ritual. So this is actually going back to Sankara, has a secondary meaning besides being a formation or something formed that's created by conditions. It also has a specific meaning of being a ceremony. And the preparation of a ceremony which is going to be leading to a rebirth of a purified self. And what we would do in this ceremony is we would create some object which is standing for us, a sacrificial object. So the sacrificer is making an object that is representing them, and then putting the object in the fire and burning it, leading to this purified self. And so then the Buddha, in many, many teachings, he speaks about fire as a completely different kind of meaning, as a fire which is fueled by greed, hatred, and delusion, which causes all of the six sense bases and all of our entire experience to be on fire. So tanha, which is usually translated as craving or thirst, and upadana, which is often translated as clinging. Tanha has an aspect of being insatiable, and it's frequently compared to the insatiable nature of fire. And then upadana is compared to the fuel. So the tanha and the fuel are in this kind of like this interaction, in this mythology, this visual. See, I think visuals are sometimes much better than other kinds of concepts for being something that's actually memorable and useful in practice. So with craving and clinging, this is the fire and the fuel, which leads to becoming and birth, rebirth in the cycle of samsara, which is inherently dukkha. It's painful, it's tiresome, it's weary, it's awful, it's sorrowful indeed. It is to be born again and again. That's the Buddhist way of taking it. But then there's the Vedic ritual way of taking it, which is this becoming and this birth is the coming to be of this purified self, the creation of this pure atta. In the Vedic tradition, as with many other religious systems, that would be reborn in heaven into blissful, unchanging, eternal existence. But the punchline in dependent origination is like where the Buddha is telling this story that people can hear and say, yes, we have our experiences, and we have our natural appetites and our delights, and we are building up all of our mansions, everything in our life that we value that's precious to us, we build them all up, and we're doing all of these things happily with the expectation that this is like culminating in this eternal self being in heaven. But then the Buddha is sort of saying like, well, no, when you're reborn, what are you reborn into? But aging, sickness, and death. Sorrow, lamentation, aging, sickness, and death. Even in heaven, still the gods are subject to aging, sickness, and death. So if we think of, it's telling a story about identification, how we identify with all of the things that we experience, we identify with our feelings, we identify with this world, then that clarifies the opposite to dependent origination, which is the Tathagata's way of knowing and experiencing. And we've read this passage before, and we can read it again. The Tathagata too, accomplished and fully enlightened, directly knows earth as earth. Having directly known earth as earth, he does not conceive himself as earth. He does not conceive himself in earth. He does not conceive himself apart from earth. He does not conceive earth to be mine. So that's the identification which is not happening. And then he does not delight in earth. That's abhinandati, nandi. That's delighting. Craving is when you don't have it, you're reaching for it. And nandi is when you have it and you want to keep it. You want to chew on it. So he does not delight in earth. Why is that? Because he has understood that this delight is the root of suffering, and that with being as a condition, there is birth, and that for whatever has come to be, there is aging and death. So now, that is my talk. Okay, so I think this may be enough. We will welcome you to join us in giving respect to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
Adang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka